Let's begin this with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for coming into our lives. Thank you for bringing us together in ecclesia so we may help each other share and find our path to you. Tonight, Lord, we'll be talking about one of your most important commandments. And it's one the world needs now, maybe more than ever before. And that's to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Lord, please spread your arms of love and compassion over all of us here. Remind everybody around the world that in the end, we are one planet, one people, together to glorify and honor your name. Please give us the strength, understanding, compassion, and ability to pass on the love you give to us and pass it on to each other so that together we can truly make the world in your image. Amen.
Yeah.
And with that, let's go into the first song.
Okay. Let's hope I pulled up the right one.
Find out. Yes.
Love is but a song we sing, feels the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry. Though the bird is on the wing, and you may not know why. Smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Some may come and some may go. We will surely pass. When the one that left us here returns for us at last.
Oh. Are we done?
Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. If you hear the song I sing, you will understand. Listen. You hold the key to love and fear, all in your trembling hand. Just Just one key unlocks them both. It's there at your command. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. I said, come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Right now. Right now.
And we're back. That was, as the video showed you, was the Youngbloods. That was recorded back in 1967. And I think the message of yesterday is as important as it is today. Back then, we had Vietnam, the civil unrest, and the country was, once again teetering on a brink of some sort. And these protest songs of love had come through, and I think it's nice that they're still as important today as they were back in the summer of love. Today's talk is going to be, as the opening prayer alluded to, about loving your neighbor as yourself. I mean, after all, loving your neighbor as yourself is a pretty straightforward thing, isn't it? No. A question that's commonly asked is, how can I love my neighbor as myself if I don't love myself? It's a question that I used to fight with for years, decades actually. It's actually the reason that I picked this topic to talk about. It holds great importance to me. I've spent the better part of my life struggling with that notion, with success coming only the past few years. To try and answer the question, though, I think we need to think about this and talk about it in two parts. And as always, feel free to jump in anywhere along the line, and we'll talk about things, because after all, everything applies to us here. Before I begin pontificating, which is another way of saying, as you can tell, I'm making this up as I go along, let's start with a couple questions. And I'm going to see if I can make this work, because I am a technology junkie. There we go. The questions we have tonight to start with. I'd love to hear your opinions about these things. Do you believe that you can love your neighbor as yourself? And what do you think can cause people not to love themselves? Kind of an interesting question to start with, isn't it? And I got nowhere to go, so I can just sit here and wait.
I think it's easier to.
I think it's easier to answer the second question than the first one,
Absolutely.
because people can not love themselves because of things they've done that they are sorry for later,
Mhm.
regrets, and self-blame can come into play. And so if they can't get past that and move on, forgive themselves, then they are kind of stuck.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a little bit.
I think you can love others even if you don't love yourself, but I'm not sure how fully.
All right. That's fair. Oh, by the way, well, we can wait.
May I go next?
Absolutely. Renee, please talk to us.
I was not expecting this. Is a very sensitive subject.
Yeah, surprise.
Oh, somehow I think we are conditioned that it's important to love everyone else. And we may also be conditioned to put ourselves last. And it's generational. It can go from, I think it can repeat from one generation to the next, this concept of, no, you have to do everything for everyone else and love others, but taking the time to love oneself may not be taught. And to Elaine's point, what do you think can cause people not to love themselves? It's a lot of self-blame, guilt, other types of feelings that may have been caused by their own experiences. Maybe somebody told them, that they weren't good enough or whatever the situation is. I think your mind can tell you that you are loving your neighbor even if you don't love yourself. But the question can arise, like, what is love supposed to really mean? I can do for my neighbor, I can help my neighbor, I can really, maybe that's the process, of trying to love, and then maybe it gets reflected back and that can build up how one can love themselves. I don't know. But there's enough, I think, going around of what we call wounded inner child, wounded inner child that just may not have necessarily been ever taught that it's okay. It's imperative to understand loving yourself.
Well, there actually is no right or wrong answer to this, because each one of us bases the answer and the thoughts on our lives.
Yeah.
So it seems to work out that way. Let me turn this off for a second. Then you've seen the question, so we can just go back to some sort of reality. I bet you.
Sorry, but
Go ahead.
growing up, I never was allowed to meet the level of expectation. And that was very difficult for me, and it still is.
Okay. All right. That's understandable. Rania, you thought this was gonna, since I was doing this was gonna be just a day at the beach, didn't you? No, why should I pick something easy? Anyway.
I think Elaine's point about I think you can love others when you don't love yourself. But it's interesting that you positioned it as maybe not as thoroughly. But I think I really believe, I'm a big believer in love languages. And so I think we give love in the language that we need. But it doesn't, if that other person it's not their language, I believe they don't receive it. You could be giving all day long in your own language, but they don't speak that language, so they don't feel that as love. And so there's just another kind of, just to throw another wrench into thinking about this, is how is it communicated? But I think, and to Robert's point, I think parents, or I was a bullied kid, so just in our life experiences, things are put on us, and then I think at some point we don't need anyone else to do it. We start doing it to ourselves. If we put expectations on ourselves that just make it harder and harder, and then we fall into this pattern of regret and guilt and all of that comes with it.
Well, it's interesting when you mentioned the love language. Maybe at some time we could do a talk about that,
Sure.
because I think understanding people's love language um, could help. I mean, there might be, but there are times that two people have completely different love languages. They think they're doing something loving for the other, but the other doesn't see it because they don't identify with it.
Right.
So,
And I mean, not to get into the psychology too much, but to Robert's point of his expectations on him growing up could have been that person's way of not just parenting, but that could have their love language could have been speaking in a way that worked for them, but that's not Robert's language.
right.
So he received something completely different, in that I just remember my best friend from junior high, when I first discovered the concept of the love languages, the very first book. Now they've made a million books of them for everybody. And, if you like biscuits and gravy, you have that kind of love language. But the original five love languages, she was reading this book, and she was married to a guy that had gone into the military right out of high school. And she had followed his career around the world. And at this point, their daughter was 12 or 13 years old. And so they'd been together, 15, 16 years at that point. So their marriage was in in that chapter. And so she's reading this book, and it dawned on her that her husband would be out detailing her car for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday. And she was in the house resenting him for not giving her 10 minutes of FaceTime. And his love language was acts of service, and her love language was quality time. And so learning to know and then intentionally speak someone else's love language, can be very helpful. But I just see, we always say communication is so much of our problems in America. Maybe we need maybe part of required education, relational education, is love languages too.
Oh, sure. How we see ourselves isn't anywhere near the same way that the outside world sees us. And it's especially true with folks that are dealing with some sort of depression or some issues. Instead of seeing their successes, they tend to dwell on their failures. And that can make them feel pretty much like they're living a lie. And if they're living a lie, why should they be loved? They can have not much of a problem loving their neighbor because they know how to give love and they know how to give compassion. But inside, in the quiet moments, in the quiet darkness of their souls, they dwell on their own failures. So they have no compassion for themselves. In short, they're racked with guilt and regret, or regret. Regret for things they may have said and done, which have in any way hurt people, especially ones that they care about, and regrets for the choices they've made in the past. Interestingly enough, even if those choices put them into a better situation than they would have had. And for a moment, they can show compassion for others, but not ourselves. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde situation. The one that had always bothered me, as we know, that I never went to college. I wanted to. I was supposed to. I had a full ride scholarship to MIT. That's not bad. But no, I decided it'd be more fun, to join the circus and travel with a rock and roll band for a couple of years. And in the process, found out an entirely different life. Um, going from music into TV, and from then eventually into here. Now, looking back, I've had an incredible life. I mean, it's been a life of fables. I mean, it's just, holy crap. If it were to end today, it's been a great run. Um, but it wasn't what I had intended. And there is something very intimidating being around people, for me anyway, that are college educated, because there's some degree of smartness. That's a good term, or a certain group of intelligence and reasoning that I don't feel I have, even though in theory I have a ridiculous IQ. But there is a way of getting down a path of compassion and forgiveness for yourself and for people that feel the way. And it starts with the word context. Context is very important here. And it ends with forgiveness. When you look back at your life and you run up against the wall of regret, because you do, take a step back and look at the situation not as the you of today, but the you of that moment in time. Remember that situation, remember the details of it. Immerse yourself in everything that was going on in your life at that time. Let's just wash over you every detail. In that situation, more than likely, you made the best choice possible at that moment. Sometimes the best possible selection of a collection of really bad choices. So if you made the best decision you could, and you made your choices at that time in good faith, well, there's no way that you could see into the future. So there's no reason for you to regret, because everything you made, every decision that was made, was based on then. Now you've moved along, you might look at things differently, and you might wish you made other choices, but those choices brought you to where you are. And if you didn't make the right choices in that situation, oops, you're human, it happens. In any event, it's best to forgive or understand the then you, and the reasons you did at the time what you felt right. Allow that same compassion to yourself that you gave others so freely. Treat former you as you would an old lost friend. You don't have to forgive your past or run away from it any longer. Forgive and look to the future. After all, as ridiculous and corny as this sounds, if you spend too much time living in the past, you'll really have no future. That was my corniness for the moment. Now, there is always going to be someone that's going to say, it's just not that easy. Well, having been there myself on a couple occasions, one just recently, I know it's not easy. But I did it once. That then, to situations out of my control, it recently returned, and it came back every bit as strong. At some point, the regrets and feelings that you have with you become an old friend. It's a friend of darkness. It's a crutch that you can always depend on and lean on, the same way an alcoholic hangs on to a glass of wine, a couple of fingers of whiskey, scotch in my case, or an ice cold, or if I can do this, or an ice cold beer. To change it, it's not easy. At first, it's a constant struggle. But as with everything else, whether you're learning music, learning philosophy, learning how to drive, or learning how to fly, it's something that the more you do, slowly things change. It gets easier. It was a very hard struggle this time for me to come back from the darkness, but in time, with help from above and those around me, I fought through the darkness and once again live in the light, in the now. Knowing my future is going to be whatever I want and not hearkening to echoes in the past, which is going to bring me to yet another question that you're going to think about. And I will call that up because that's what I've learned to do. Watch this. Maybe I select it here. And I'll go to the next question. There it is. Do you have any boundaries of love and compassion to others? Does loving your neighbor extend beyond your circle of friends? Does it extend to the homeless and those with addiction or issues or those you've never met? Or basically, how far does your love of your neighbor go? Now, that is a couple really interesting things to ponder. And rather than go through them right now instantly, maybe trying to force people into a remark or some decision, why don't we play the second tune?
Okay.
I think that would be might be a good thing to do. Do I have to stop sharing?
Yes, you do.
But too bad. All right.
Now,
I may have
wondering if
to,
she would,
Yeah.
are you warm enough?
pull it up here again.
I should have given you more warning, but
It freezes
I wanted
me.
it all to seem spontaneous.
It's all right.
Robert, you wanna-
This one is the
Thank you.
John Ford Coley.
John Ford Cole.
Thank you for giving.
Okay. Oh, stop. Share screen. Okay.
Huh.
We may need to turn our volume down.
Just the opposite of Robert.
Oh.
I was always loved, felt loved, and I could do no wrong. So
There we go. That's another world.
You're staring, it's just not playing.
I'm sorry, I was listening to Dad too. He was sharing a little bit.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And I trusted it. And I'm still that way. I grew up in a family of lovers and positive people.
That's great.
And I guess I never had anybody question me about my conduct. So I didn't get in trouble.
That's great.
And I didn't have any inclination to do that because I wanted to be loved. And my brothers and sisters always tease me because they say, Mother loves you best. Well, I don't know that she did, but I always denied it. And I always felt her. And I always felt my father's love and approval. And my tendency is to love other people and to trust them. And if they need something, I'm the guy to help them get it. But I have to say that I'm probably the luckiest man I know because I felt the love of all my siblings, and I felt the love of my parents, my grandparents, my relatives, and my neighbors. But I think it would be horrible to never feel love. I think it would be heartbreaking and discouraging. You think, well, what's the use? I think I like these questions
Thank you. We
because
do. We do.
brings all that home to me.
That's good. Sometimes you're into a situation where you are in a loving family. I mean, for the most part, I was. However, sometimes for a reason that you can't explain, jealousy from one of your parents can pop up. And that can have just a devastating effect. I'll give you an example of that. There was a contest back in the early mid 60s by Hughes Aircraft. And it was, Michelle's heard this story. There was a contest that they were having. It was a worldwide contest that they were designing some tools for Hughes Aviation and Hughes Aerospace. And they set out these guidelines and made this international contest. The winner, I think it was 1967, I think, the winner would get $50,000, which back then was just a ton of money. My father was a toolmaker, so he and his friends had gotten together at the house one day, and they're going through things and they're doing stuff. I walk in and I'm looking at it and, what are you doing? And they explain it to me. Said, well, couldn't you just do this? And they look at it like, yeah, we can do it. Is that what you had in mind? Well, that's exactly what it's supposed to be. So but they solved it. What happened was they wrote everything up. Politely, nice enough of them. They put my name on the thing as well as solving it. And yes, indeed, we won. And as a result, everyone got a check. This is great. They got a check and a form letter from Hughes Aviation and Aerospace. They'd each gotten a check for $10,000. And again, the prize was $50,000. Something about where's mine? Instead of getting a form letter, I get a handwritten letter from Howard Hughes himself. And it was praising me about my help on this thing, and that he was afraid that I would take the money and blow it on candy and baseball cards. He's probably right. But so what he had decided to do instead was made as a scholarship for me. When I turned 18 and I was going to go to school, I was to report to him, and I would get the scholarship directly from Mr. Hughes. Not bad. I mean, that's a pretty, big deal. And I was really happy with that. And my mother was of the opinion, because I was getting all this great praise from it. My mother was of the opinion that anyone could have done that. No, Mom, in the entire world, only one person figured it out, me. Because no, that wasn't how it worked. Yeah, it did. Mr. Hughes says so right here. Her response was to take the letter and rip it up. So what that ended up doing, that kind of discouraged me from being smart. I didn't have to, there was no need for me to be the smartest guy in the room. As long as I got average grades, I'd be okay. So that kind of bothered me for a long time. That's why I hadn't progressed as well as I should have. And maybe why it was so easy to blow up MIT. So anyway, so sometimes jealousy is a thing, and it's something that you know, you live with, but at some point you just forgive. Okay. Have I stalled long enough?
Oh, I didn't know you were stalling.
Oh.
Just thought you were sharing
No, well, that
a
too.
very heartbreaking story.
Yeah. Could be worse.
Okay.
There we go. All right.
No?
That was
Are you
it.
seeing it? Are you
Like
seeing
what?
and hearing it?
Yes, and then you stopped it.
Well, the thing that frames it went away. So
Okay.
I did think you were getting it.
Name your price, a ticket to paradise. I can't stay here anymore, and I've looked high and low. I've been from shore to shore to shore. If there's a shortcut, I'd have found it, but there is no easy way around it. Light up the world, shine on me. Love is the answer. Shine on us all, set us free. Love is the answer. Who knows why? Someday we all must die. We're all homeless boys and girls, and we are never heard. It's such a lonely, lonely, lonely world. People turn their heads and walk on by. Tell me, is it worth just another try? Light up the world, shine on me. Love is the answer. Let it shine. Shine on us all, set us free. Love is the answer. Tell me, are we alive? Or just a dying planet? What are the chances? Ask the man in your heart for the answer. And when you feel afraid, when you've lost your way, and when you're all alone, and when you're far from home, and when you're down and
Elaine just added that to her Spotify.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a great song. It's a really good song. I think there's a Jerry Smith, one of the greatest guys in the ad business and promo business. He and I got together and used this for a promo for his church to increase patrons. Patrons, is that the right word? It is now. It actually, when they would play that and they played on the local stations, their attendance went up 300%. And they got some relatively wealthy patrons will do that at the same time. So yeah, that song is kind of a special thing for me. So what do we think about the questions before I move
Can you
on?
go back and repeat them?
I could, I just choose not to.
I
Yeah,
don't remember the question.
I remembered them. I mean, come on.
Well, there were a few. I'm just going to go with the first one, I think.
Well,
Oh, that one. Do you have any boundaries of showing love and compassion?
yeah, you can take any one of those that you want, and just tell me what you think. Or you can say that I'm completely full of crap on this one.
No, I mean, I'm trying to think what would be the hardest situation or person
No,
for
you're
me.
living it right now, actually.
I think the first
What, Rod?
question is really like really making me having to shine the mirror on me.
Mhm.
I think because of hurt, whatever my own hurts are, I put a boundary.
It's the way we protect ourselves, Ron. Yeah, we put up boundaries. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see
Sorry,
you. We're glad you're here. We've missed you.
I missed you guys too.
Think on this question, Rachel. If you have any boundaries for showing love and compassion to others, what would be the limit for you, or is there one?
So I just
I
want to
think-
continue. Thank you for asking the question. I think it's hard for me, so just letting you know. But
Okay.
thanks for asking it.
It's okay. It's here to help.
Yeah, I think boundaries, I don't want to think I have boundaries, but then I think of the fathers of several of my childhood friends who were sexually abusing their daughters. And I'm glad justice came to one. It did not come to another. And would I be polite if I had to encounter him today? Sure, but that's not the same thing as love. I could be compassionate and try to, be that way, but to really, today, Kenny, my brother-in-law, preached on a text from the book of Romans, and basically Paul taking this to another level. And in Ecclesia, we talk a lot about radical hospitality. What does the concept of radical hospitality look like? And I think these go hand in hand. And the text from his sermon was talking about that we're to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Going above and beyond, as though it were a competition to love better and harder and honor someone, go above and beyond in honoring someone. And we dishonor, but we have been dishonored. And I think that, there's so much pain for so many people at some level in some part of their life, but it's I don't know. It's hard for me to think about having a boundary of that kind of going above and beyond. And that's this kind of unconditional love, right? We're talking about, phileos and that kind of brotherly love is one thing. It's easy to say no to that. The hardest, I think, is that whole unconditional love, which is really what he's asking us to do.
And I think when you've lost your trust.
And Elaine said, Elaine, I'll just turn it to you. So the
When you've lost your trust in someone and the situations you just met with your friends, or I thought, for instance, a job I had in Big Spring. I lost trust in some of those people who were above me because they assumed things that were not true about me and didn't give me a chance to explain myself. So I wouldn't trust them, and I consequently probably would be less forgiving and compassionate towards them because I didn't feel that I was given that in that instance. So I think when we lose trust with people, it's harder to us to live in compassion and love towards that person because of our loss of trust.
But as you say that, Elaine, here's the thing that's interesting. You know the answer. So just by nature of knowing it, in some way, that helps the healing. How far it goes is beyond ideas. But I mean, these are great answers, and I appreciate that. Let's.
Desiree.
Oh, sorry, Desiree.
So, I guess on the homelessness and the addiction, if I could see the question again, but
I'm sorry, certainly.
that's fine.
There.
My daughter's moving very close, well, right in between Seattle and Portland.
Okay.
And we're just listening to something on the radio about the homeless communities and the legal drugs in Portland, and just the horribly hard lives that everybody's having with that, the addicts, the people that have businesses around them, the homelessness on the streets. And it's really hard not to kind of feel afraid of that. But even within my own family, there have been addiction issues, and close enough to homelessness to being homeless. And I don't know, it's hard to keep banging your head against the wall, like if in an addiction issue, where you can't help somebody, but you want to, and you still believe in them, and you still want to love them, and you still hear that they want to be better. And some make it, some don't. I'm sure my father was one of the people that didn't make it. But you keep trying. And so when I see these people everywhere, even like in Santa Fe today, there was like a short little area where the homeless people were. And on one hand, I find it hard to be compassionate, but I know probably nearly firsthand what they're dealing with. And sometimes I don't have good thoughts about them, and other times I think okay, how can I have good thoughts for these people and love them? And I've never gone on any kind of missionary work or anything, outreach, which one of the stories we heard on the radio was these people that go out and give these homeless people food and everything else. They're not or the addicted on the street. They're not necessarily expecting that they can get them unaddicted. They just want them to know that somebody cares. And so I guess in some way, if we can express that, but I know I can't solve all these problems, you know.
And some skeletons are really hard to get away from. And that a person may or may not be able to do that on their own.
Mhm. Absolutely. Rachel, what do you got for us?
So, a couple things with this
Yeah.
one. I'm of the mind that you can love and show compassion, and it doesn't require for you to trust the person, because you're not expecting anything back for that. And in the same moment, those that have addiction, those that are alcoholics, people who are homeless. I mean, I used to work in Long Beach, and I used to deal with a lot of homeless vets down there. And some of them were homeless by choice because it was just too hard to be in a home. And some of them were homeless because of mental illness. And I met people who were homeless because of both the parents. One was a construction worker, one was a nurse. Both injured their backs at the same time. They had 2 kids, and slowly they lost everything. And I knew them before they lost everything, and I met them again, not knowing after they lost everything. And so I'm of the mind of, you can always show love, you can always show compassion, because you don't know what they're going through. You don't know who or how they got to where they are. And I'm always, it drives my wife absolutely nuts, because a lot of times I'm like, you don't know what, like, I heard a story from a friend where his father stole a goat and killed it and hid it into the chimney so that the farmer wouldn't find it, because he was trying to feed all his siblings. Now, for that farmer, it's like, gosh darn it, somebody stole my goat, and it's angering, and I lost something. But on the other side, that person, he stole the goat to feed his family because they were starving and they didn't have any money to feed themselves. And he was only 12 years old and was just trying to do what he could. So there's always another story. And I do have a hard time showing love and compassion towards those who abuse children, especially sexual abuse, because that is something that you should be able to control yourself. I have a hard time with physical abuse, but then I've also been around people who have survived physical abuse from their parents, and how they've turned around and been like, I don't know what was so wrong with them, why they were so broken. Because that's what it takes, is to be broken. Something broke them, that they felt like they had hurt someone else. It doesn't mean that you have to like them. It doesn't mean that you have to be friends with them. It doesn't mean that you have to trust them with your money or trust them with your life. But they are still human, and something happened that made them so horrible that they are who they are. And everybody deserves to be loved. Everybody deserves compassion. We're all human. But it doesn't mean we have to like them. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with them. It just means that you have to sit there, and when somebody does harm me, when somebody is mean to me, I don't wish them harm. I usually wish for them to have an understanding of what they've done to someone else. I pray that for you to have an understanding of the hurt that you have caused, or the pain that you've caused, not for you to experience, but to have the understanding of it, and to come around and go, oh my gosh. And see other people, when somebody's like that, see other people as people, and have that love and compassion. And that's what I hope for them. Find that love and compassion, because that's what everybody needs. It doesn't help to hold on to grudges. It doesn't help to hold on to anger, because that's all on us. It doesn't make us feel better. And that's how I look at it. So yes, I do have boundaries, because my boundary is, I have a problem with sexual predators for children, or even rapists. I have a problem with somebody who feels that they can take that from someone. But I also, I try and look at it and go, what happened? Why are you so broken? I don't want to be a friend. I pray that you see that you are broken and that you stop harming other people. And what do I need to do to make sure that you can't harm anyone else?
Very nice. Yeah, this is all a very, very deep discussion. So let's change it. We've talked about the personal side of the question. Let's take a look and see what the Bible has to say about it, because there are a few words here and there thrown in. The Bible itself is filled with all kind of life lessons for us. Everything from the Ten Commandments all the way to Revelations. In all of those writings, all the stories, all the parables, everything else, there are two overriding messages. The first, of course, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and soul. The second, love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, I was doing some research for this. I found out that the theme of loving your neighbor as yourself is so integral to mankind and to the Bible. It is mentioned in the Bible no less than 9 times. That's a bunch. So let's just take a look at these. These are no particular order. We're going to start with Matthew. Honor your father and mother as yourself, and love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew again talks to us is, you shall love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and all your mind. This is a great and first commandment. And Matthew 39, and it is the second. It's like, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Going over to Mark 12, 30, and 31. Love your Lord your God with all of your heart, and with all your soul, and with your mind, and all of your strength. Once again, following it up, the second is love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. I would think it should be there are no commandments greater than these, but it was a long time ago. Take a look to see what Luke has to say about it. Luke answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Once again, the theory continues. Moving on to Romans, which has got a lot to say about all of this. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. Well, you shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, all are summed up in this, saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, kind of looking at the thought here that maybe of all the 10 commandments, the one that isn't written is the one that we should pay the most attention to. James 8. If you fulfill the royal law according to Scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, and ye do well. So do this, you can work out fine for us. Galatians. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. I don't know how they get this out of one word, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That would be one hellacious word. That's all I'm saying. Times were different then. Leviticus. We'll wrap this up with Leviticus. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. I'm the Lord. Sorry, I was talking about me for a second. I'm back. So it's in there a lot. It could be argued that it might be the central theme of the entire Bible. Not be flip about it, but for the love of God. So what we're talking about here is we should treat people with the same kindness, respect, and compassion as we want for ourselves. It's a call to be selfless and to put others before ourselves. This commandment is considered one of the most important teachings of Jesus and is, or should be, still widely followed by Christians today. I've explained how to love your neighbor when you don't love yourself. Loving your neighbor as yourself is a commandment that requires us to treat others with the same kindness, respect, and compassion we would want for ourselves. However, as we talked about earlier, it's not uncommon to struggle with loving oneself. In such cases, it's important to remember that the commandment is more about our actions than our feelings. It's what we do for each other, not how it makes us feel. So when God commands us to love our neighbors as ourselves, he's talking more about our actions than our feelings. Instead of focusing on our own wants and our own needs, we should focus on our neighbors' wants and needs, as they're focusing on ours. This is the substance of the law and applies to us universally, regardless of our self-image. Or put it in another way. Once again, I'm going to look back in history for a number of years. Bob Geldof wanted to make a song to give to the world. He wanted every major singer at the time to sing on this record. Everyone who was asked gladly showed up. It was a who's who to benefit to such a noble effort. From Michael Jackson to Bruce Springsteen, Stevie Wonder to Cyndi Lauper, 21 superstars. I mean, serious superstars and all gathered to make history. Imagine that much talent in the room at one time. As you think about that, I'm going to show you a sign that was on the door of the recording session, because this is moderately important. This was put up there, and that's what it said. You put 21 of the greatest singers of our time, eagles are going to flare. But when you look at what you're doing and the reason you're doing it, and just to remind people that Bob had put that on the door, and as I understand it, it was followed to the letter. There were no eagles. I would have paid to see that. So there's that. Who says rock and roll can't hook this up? So in all fairness, if you don't love yourself, it can be a challenge to show love to others. However, it's important to remember that God created you in his image and endowed you with his own characteristics such as strength, compassion, and reason. You are valuable to God because he created you. To wrap this up, loving your neighbor as yourself requires us to focus on our neighbor's wants and our neighbor's needs instead of our own. It's important to remember that your value comes from God and that he created you in his image. Therefore, you are valuable and worthy of love and respect. Now, before I go to this last bit of music for the night and wrap this up, let me leave you with a quote from Tracy's hero and Michelle's good friend, Richard Rohr.
My new best friend, Richard
Your
Rohr.
new best friend. Mr. Rohr says, if we don't transform pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. So it's time for us to look inward, forgive ourselves, try and put as much regret as we can behind, keep working on that, and put ourselves toward the love and benefit of others as, hopefully, they will give onto us. And with that final bit of information, Michelle, roll that final song.
Well, do we want to? Can we say things? Can we share things first?
Oh, if you'd rather, you can do it before or after. It's,
Well, I, since you put the ego sign up on the door,
Yes.
I had when Rick first asked about doing a session on the scriptures that teach to love your neighbor as yourself, and the whole concept of what if I don't love myself, and I don't want to discount that at all, because clearly that is a big piece of it, and for some people's life experience. But I have always translated those scriptures differently. I've never really looked at them in terms of needing to love myself in order to love my neighbor, or that was a relationship in that way. I always translated it as ego. And so for me, I've always read that as basically, at the end of the day, we might not like ourselves, but we do things selfishly all the time. When we choose ourselves and our own desires and wants and needs and hopes, we choose ourselves over others all the time. And I guess I use the word ego in that way, is choosing and honoring others like you would yourself, like we do put ourselves first, or and does that make sense what I'm
It does. It also reminds us it's not all about us. I mean, there are other people there, and we're all a part of that. So just to concentrate on us is both arrogant and egotistic. So I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a much bigger world around us, and we can all share in that.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that, or on any of those scriptures or those teachings? Rano, I did tease him already about not including Bhagavad Gita in this.
Oh, I think I have more to learn from Bhagavad Gita. I think this concept is, and I don't know if it's because, the Hindu religion is so ancient that you were never not with people anyway. I mean, you just depended on each other. There was no question. So maybe when all the scriptures were written, it was almost like, of course you are connected to every living and even non-living thing, because everything has energy, right? Within the cosmos. So, but this particular teaching, because I think of the reflection and what Christ was all about, and even in the Old Testaments, this emphasis is so important. And I think if we can remember that, and it has to go in coupling with, we are made in the image of the most noble of source, right? We're made in the image of God. Then how can you not already be complete and good enough? But to reflect that back to the other person, I will love this other human too, this other being that is also made in that image. We're still connected. I think is love on a kind of like on a spectrum, like how do I give if I'm hurt? Maybe I'm just not loving as much today because I'm in pain. I think that's giving me a lot of reflection. But I think the good thing, what I love about today's conversation, is that this is all can be development, right? You're on this journey where we can work on ourselves and maybe work on the pain. The Richard Rohr's quote is extremely powerful. So that will give us pause to say, well, I can work on myself. And I think, I really appreciate this conversation a lot. This was super good So thank you. Oh, and as far as the Gita and all, it's a lot of, they use the word self with a capital S, but that's because that capital S self is because you are a reflection of God. I mean, you're not separated, and that God is within you. So whatever, let's say even harm to yourself is harm to the big S self, right? So that kind of puts you in a pause that would you want to create harm to the other person who's also part of that whole connected divinity, right?
It's interesting. That's a great reminder of the cultural differences of understanding religious texts, because the ancient Hebrews, Israelites specifically, in their culture would have been different than some of the ancient Eastern cultures, like those in India, for instance, that the whole culture is of an understanding that all is connected to God, supreme being. It's all a web, that what impacts one impacts another, that it's all, there is a literal connection that in other cultures, specifically our American culture, but even going back to the Israelites, they were of a different culture, right? And so maybe they needed that there was enough individualism in that culture, perhaps, to need to hear that type of a message. But what you're saying is, in parts of the world, there's an understanding that it is all, if we hurt one, we're hurting God as well as the one that we're hurting, because it's all tied together.
Yeah. And this is so interesting. And I've been reading a little bit more about, because I'm so curious about where we are as in terms of our human existence right now, in terms of the timeline. They say that we're kind of going in a space where kind of disconnected, right? Maybe from the source. And it's a cycle. And then this whole timeline, we'll have to go through some difficulty maybe before we kind of come to this reconnection of understanding, like, oh, but we're completely connected at the soul level with everything around us, like you said, the web part, but we're a little bit distant from that now. And they say that this is kind of like the evolution of a cycle of time. Like we go through these cycles of, there was a time when the souls were all connected and we look at each other with no differences, right? And then over time, maybe whatever the layers of pain, I guess, or lack of processing, or lack of connectivity, maybe technology is kind of part of that, creating some of that disconnect, even though we invented it as a great tool. So I'm hopeful that this kind of circle coming together here as a circle today is what will create our own little mini revelations and reconnections to each other. I know was it last week we talked about critical mass, or I can't remember who else. Yeah. So I think I thought 12% is all you need. Then it kind of logarithmically kind of improves. So I really appreciate these conversations. I know how much huge work Ecclesia is doing too. I mean, the fact that you guys went to the Parliament of World Religions and represented this very radical hospitality concept is so needed. I really appreciate it.
And if it'll make you feel better, Renu, if we listen to the tinfoil hat people, that massive shift is going to happen on the 24th and 25th of this month.
Say that again, Rick.
There's supposed to be a massive shift of darkness and everything on the 24th and 25th of this month.
Oh, I'll have to look at the calendar.
Yeah.
I have a Hindu calendar, so it's always moon-based, so there's probably, might be Ganesh Chaturthi.
So I don't intend to pay my rent for next month. I think there's no point to it.
I knew that's going.
But I mean, what the hell? But they, I just heard this last night that the tinfoil hat folks are predicting something coming up. So
they're always predicting something.
they are. In fact, I left a note on this one that I'll come back to talk to him on the 26th to see the next date.
Wow.
All right. Well, does anyone have any final thoughts? It's nearly time to wrap this up, but I don't want to stop somebody else from
You know,
sharing anything.
before we play the closing music, thank you all. Thank you for putting up with this and humoring me so much. It was nothing but pure terror, and I swear to never do it again.
Oh, it was excellent. I don't know what
Great.
you're
And-
talking about.
Yeah, you did a great job. I
It
didn't
was
get to even
like-
hear the whole thing.
That's probably better.
It was super good.
It was super good. And guess what, guys? We get him 2 more times this fall.
Nice.
Yes, but these are something that I'll be more in my wheelhouse. This one was a personal psychological ordeal.
Yeah, I know. I hope it was a
It was
growing,
cathartic.
a growing
Yeah, it was.
experience.
It was a catharsis. And I got through without any scotch.
That's right.
So there's that.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about and meditate on, and I love the little micro. What'd you say, Ronu? Micro. I think we'll take away lots of different things from tonight.
Oh, those are called microflatulations.
I don't even know what I
You
said.
got Robert laughing over here. All right. Let me
Nuggets.
get the final song up here.
There you go.
I should have put it in the PowerPoint, I guess. Eek. Stop. Stop. Sorry, I gotta share my screen
There you go.
so you can hear it better.
If you wake up, don't wanna smile. If it takes just a little while, open your eyes, look at the day. You'll see things in a different way. Don't stop
Before we close and Dad's gonna do a closing prayer for us. I'd like to ask for any prayer requests tonight.
Just a
I-
simple prayer request for all people to remain healthy during this tough time when people are dealing with viruses, COVID, some resurgences. So prayers for all that may be affected, and prayers for all who are trying to stay as healthy as possible, and using some techniques of making sure that protecting one another, loving their neighbor, making sure that we're doing the right things for each other. Thank you.
I pray that I never do this again.
I pray you do.
I was gonna say, I'm sorry, Rick, that prayer will not be answered.
Yeah, I'm used to it. And just in case, on any offhand chance that people might think this, no, none of this was Chat GPT. I made up every word myself.
I am very proud of you.
Thank you.
It was a good talk. It was a good
Thank you.
topic for discussion.
Every once in a while, I can write seriously. Just don't depend on that.
We have prayer requests here for our friend John Ballou, whose cancer has returned, and is a friend of Mom and Dad's, and he thought he'd beat it already with chemo, and he looks like he's headed into another round. And on that note, our friend in Ecclesia, Tom Foster, has given permission to share and has asked for prayer requests. He's been diagnosed with cancer. Tom has a tumor at the base of his esophagus going into his stomach. And he's thinking of moving so he can get better care, because he's been telling the doctors in Corpus Christi forever that something wasn't right, and they wouldn't listen to him or do the scans to find out. And they just kept saying it was his heart. And he says, "This is not my heart. Something else is wrong." And so this weekend, he twice was not able to swallow. So it's impacting his ability to swallow. And he wound up in the ER because of that. And that's, I think, when they got a CAT scan and they found the tumor. So he's thinking of moving to San Antonio or Houston or somewhere where he may get better medical care than where he's at. So keep Tom in your prayers. And if I think he would really welcome calls and texts and cards and such. If you need information on how to reach him, just reach out to me and I'll share that with you. I think he'd appreciate it. Anything else? Any other prayer requests?
My friend Tony Staley, who's got 4 types of stage 4 cancer, and he's been going through all the process, but he's not getting better.
So Robert's friend Tony that we've been praying for, he's gone through has 4 types of cancer. He's gone through all the stuff and he's just not getting any better. So a lot of cancer, a lot of illness. And I'm just grateful for this group and your love and your compassion with each other, because at the end of the day, we know we have it here.
Father, we know you love us, but sometimes we don't feel loved. Those who have physical problems are in that category. They're not feeling loved. They're not feeling healed. We pray for those whose names have been mentioned, that they will feel your love and your healing will take care of them. Lord, bless all those who grieve today, and bless all of those who are lonely and lost. Father, we thank you for your comfort and your healing. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night, all.